everyone, I'm Deborah Martin, and I want to welcome you back to the Invisible Matters podcast. This is season 2, and I am so excited. You all sent in ideas, comments, and it really helped us come up with a really great lineup for our second season. Remember, this is where we are all reminded that we all have strengths and we all have needs, and sometimes those needs might be non-apparent to other people. And so I just want you to remember the best way that you can support the podcast is to subscribe and follow. Today, our topic is Invisible Matters and Policing. I am so thrilled to have two very special guests here today. I have the Prince George's County Sheriff, John D.B. Carr. Also, we have the Anne Arundel County Sheriff, Everett L. Sesker. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you all for being here. I know you are two very busy people, and so I think, when I reached out, I was just really honored that you would come and take the time to sit with me today. I really believe that the relationship between first responders and people who have special needs can really be enhanced the more we have conversations like this, and the more each side learns about the other. And so that's why we're here today.
Yes. Right.
Okay, just the conversation. I would like to start out, this may sound like a silly question, but what is the difference, because I really don't know, between a police officer and a deputy, a sheriff's deputy?
Can I answer?
By all means, please.
And I'll let you.
By all means.
I get that question so many times. I'll get it every day. People, what's the difference? Why do we have two? Mm-hmm. Well, to make it easy for everybody to understand, look at the sheriff's office has the law enforcement arm for the courts. Now, the Maryland Constitution requires that every county, including Baltimore City, have an office of the sheriff. We were actually the first law enforcement agencies in the state. Okay. So way back in the day, my office was created in the year 1650. So way back in the day, they didn't have all the crimes that we have now, but they did establish courts and stuff to collect taxes. So the sheriff was responsible for the courts. Anything that came from the courts, it was our responsibility. And then it just grew from there, subpoenas, domestic violence orders and things like that, and we enforced that. So the way that it was explained to me, the sheriff is an elected official. So the county head, whether it be the county executive or county council, they have no control over the sheriff. But by the Maryland Constitution, they're required for funding the office.
Okay.
So picture some county executive or county council a few years back said, I don't like that idea. So they created their own police departments. And they're going to hire the police chief, and they have control over law enforcement that way. And they said, we're going to just take all that responsibility for investigating homicides and all that stuff, give it to the police, and whatever it says in the Maryland Constitution, that's what the sheriff will handle. So myself and John's agency here, that's why we have like a police department and we have a sheriff's office. Now, here's the thing that people don't understand. Deputies, myself and John, we have full police powers in the state of Maryland. Okay. We can make arrests, and for those who are speeding down the highway, that's the sheriff's deputy car. No, we can pull you over too and give you a ticket. So we still have full police powers.
Wow, that was a history lesson.
No, it's one of the things that being an elected sheriff, you pick up and you understand that your authority now is only in your county, but you're also able to go outside of the county and outside of the state to actually affect some of those court processes. So one of the big things also, you are elected by the people, so you serve those people. You have a better understanding. It makes a huge difference when you have to campaign for your job. You have to understand the communities that you serve, that you're talking about not only just law enforcement and having that knowledge. But then you're talking about making sure that you understand what that community needs. So you have to be very understanding. You have to actually work with your citizens to make sure you're able to get a lot of things done. When we look throughout the state, like Calvert County, Charles County, they only have a sheriff because they have a different form of government. You know, we're
You
in
said
counties.
they
They only have sheriffs. That's it.
Oh,
do
they
not
only-
they do
no
not have any
police.
police department.
Okay.
So when you look at Anne Arundel County or Prince George's, we're chartered counties where we have a county council, a county
Got it.
executive. Charles County and Calvert County, they're commissioned. You know, they have a commission. They don't have a county exec. So the sheriff is the only law enforcement that you would actually see, and that's really throughout the country. You'll see more sheriff's office than you do police departments. So again, one of the biggest things, we are, as they would say, the people's police. You know, we answer to
Okay.
our citizens and those communities in which we serve.
Wonderful.
So now when you say you're thankful for us being here, we're here because you elected us to be here. So
And we
we're
work
here.
for you, yes.
We work for you.
Okay. Okay, so you had to say yes. You know, that's interesting because have reached out to some chiefs of police.
Yes.
You see who's here.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so I always want people to remember that first responders are human beings. They're people. You
Yeah.
all get up just like everybody else, and you go to work every day. How long have you been in the force?
Let me see. I started in Prince George's County. Now, I was born and raised in Anne Arundel, but when I started my law enforcement career, it was here in Prince George's. And I'm very grateful. I learned so many things with the Prince George's County Police Department. So I did 22 years there, retired as the major, and I eventually was appointed by the governor, then Governor Hogan, to be the executive director of the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission. So I oversaw certification for all officers, deputies in the state of Maryland. And from there, I took another position. My daughter said, "You sold insurance, Dad," but I didn't sell insurance. I worked for a insurance company that insured government entities only in the state. So I was a law enforcement consultant. And what I did was I traveled the state, provided them with different agencies with training. I did PR work for them. We provided them with grant opportunities. And I saw a need for a change in leadership in the sheriff's office in Anne Arundel County. By that time, I had moved back to Anne Arundel, and I ran for sheriff. And I tell you what, it was hard work, but as you see, I'm here,
But
and
here you
I'm
are.
very grateful for the citizens to elect me.
Wow. Okay. How many years of service?
So I've actually only worked at the Prince George's County Office of the Sheriff. I actually worked my way through the ranks, and I've been at the sheriff office currently right now 23 years, going on 24. So working my way through being a Prince George's County resident. I was born in District of Columbia, but actually raised in Prince George's County in Suitland. So I was able to actually see and have a different image of law enforcement in my youth. I graduated from University of Maryland College Park and wanted to go to be at law school. Started to actually be a paralegal, and the work just wasn't for me. You really didn't interact with, you know, the people, and every day wasn't different. Every day was more paperwork, reading, and I'm more of a people type person. I want to be engaged, want to make an impact, immediate impact and difference. So I actually joined the Prince George's County Sheriff's Office and been there ever since. Working in several different units, from maternal affairs, was commander of our special allied operations, our SWAT teams. Worked in the schools. I was a school resource deputy at one point in time.
Okay.
So I have a complete understanding of the Prince George's County Sheriff's Office and Prince George's County. So those years have gone by very fast, but what I can say, well, they're very enjoyable, because during my road to become sheriff, you know, you meet so many different people, and working through each and every rank, you start to understand what the roles are and what those responsibilities are to the agency and to the community.
Well, I thank both of you for your service. You mentioned training, that at one point you were in charge of training, but I do want to talk about what type of specific training do sheriff deputies receive regarding people who have disabilities? how often is it? What does it entail? Is it enough?
So I'll start with really it's really going throughout the state of Maryland, but I'll at least talk to what we do in the academy now. We teach crisis intervention training, and that is actually working with several of our nonprofits that actually come in, talk to the incoming officers or deputies at the time, and actually run them to have them understand and show empathy and go through the processes of those invisible disabilities that we don't see on a day-to-day basis. How you should interact with somebody, what you should do, what signs you should look for when you interacting with somebody. If you give them a verbal command and they don't hear you or they're acting a certain way, what steps should you take in order to de-escalate a situation instead of escalating
Right,
it?
de-escalation
You cannot take
is important.
it personal and think that this person is just not listening or just want to be defiant to you. You have to start to assess, the individual that you're in front of. So in that training, it's a 40-hour block of instruction. You get that, and we do something at least every 2 years, if not every year, depending on where you are assigned in reference to that crisis intervention training. We did have the Santee group actually teach that, but we've gone outside to some other nonprofits. So we have iMind, we use 988. Actually taking office, I created our behavioral health unit. Out of our 328 years of existence, we've only lost 2 deputy sheriffs. And during that time frame, the cause of their, of the situation was actually serving emergency petition. And that's something that we both have to deal with. It's a court order dealing with somebody who is suffering through a mental health crisis. So it's civil. It's not a criminal issue. It's a civil issue. And you're going there to try to provide assistance and take this person to the hospital so that they could actually be diagnosed by a clinical technician.
I want to come back to that a little bit later.
And unfortunately, that individual wound up shooting and killing both of the deputies and actually going to jail. And unfortunately, that's not what we want. We want to make sure that, one, the deputies and officers are safe, but 2, we want to make sure that individual who's suffering through mental health crisis can get the treatment that they need and not actually be incarcerated or locked up.
So how often? You said every 2 years.
So you do it in the academy, then you have in service, in which we do at least every 2 years, but depending on where you are assigned. If you are in a field unit, then we actually require you at least every year to try to get some additional training dealing with that crisis intervention.
How about in Anne Arundel?
In Anne Arundel County, we do it on an annual basis through in-service, and we'll work with individuals who have hidden disabilities so deputies can understand what they're working with. If you have autism, we need to know that one of the symptoms of autism is, hey, they don't like to make eye contact, or they may not like the sounds of, that's coming from your radio or things like that. And here's one of the big things that, sometimes people don't think about. When we deal with domestic violence issues, there's another victim there that sometimes get forgotten, and that's the children. Because children can develop PTSD from seeing this domestic violence on a regular basis. So when we deal with the grown-ups, we also try to work with the kids as well to make sure their needs is met.
So were you saying you have people with disabilities participate in the training?
We have people with disabilities who will work with our deputies to talk to them. And we also have a number of our staff, who have children that have disabilities.
Right. I understand. So let me just share that I have done training with actually the Metropolitan Police Department in D.C. and the Sheriff Department, probably before you were sheriff.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
It was a couple of years ago. But as a psychologist, I have had first responders tell me that they've been in the force for 30 years, but they've never had the experience. Because what I do, when you leave that room, you actually will have had an exercise where you can touch and see and feel. I might ring a bell in your ear so that you'll experience somebody with autism. That siren is 10 times louder. Or that siren may tell me to pull over, but their brain is triggered and it tells them to run. Or your badges are shiny. Sometimes people are drawn because they have heightened sensitivity to shiny objects. I had one client who grabbed the wrist of a police officer because the officer laid his hand on his father's car, and the boy grabbed it. That could have gone very wrong.
Yeah.
But we need to have responders kind of step back and use that third eye. But important question is, you're in dangerous situations. How do you handle trying to be cautious and empathetic to the person, but at the same time, you have to be on guard, I'm sure, in terms of safety. How does that work? It has to be stressful.
You know what? It is very stressful, but I will say this. I've seen officer training changing over the years because now we're aware. We're aware that there are people out there with these hidden disabilities. So when somebody does something like it, it's not like 15, 20 years ago. You assaulted me. You know, your mind quickly goes to, okay, let me assess this situation. And one of the things I tell my deputies are, you know, the process of thinking that everybody is guilty of something, I said we have to do away with that. I said we still have to be very careful and we have in our interactions with people, but just because somebody approaches you or somebody is looking down at the ground doesn't mean they committed a crime. You know, you have to talk to that person. And once you start talking to that person, then you can slowly put together, you know, okay, this person might have some type of disability.
Right.
This person may be under the influence of something, you know.
Yeah, so you get it. But I've also had, actually, this person was in charge of the department over disabilities and special needs in a particular, department. And he said to me, I know when somebody's up to something. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, they're rocking and they're looking down at the ground and they're fidgety. And he just went on, and I said, do you know you just described somebody who could have autism?
So those days and age of the old type of policing and how we engage and deal with our citizens is much different. So when you talk about an individual who may say they can tell if a person is lying or if they did something wrong, that mentality is now washed out of agencies. We don't want that. We want somebody who's able to assess the situation, understand that just because a person may be fidgeting or may have their arms crossed or may be looking down or may have some sort of, whether it be invisible disability or their actions, there's not a fault of guilt or admission of guilt, but basically you have to be able to think your way through. I'm asking for those deputies who we actually have in our agencies to be able to think on their feet. We provide you with the training and the tools, but how do you implement that? How do you carry that? Yeah. The old school mentality is washed out, especially in this area. We don't, at least I will definitely speak for both of us. I know we do not tolerate anything like that.
Let me ask this question. I have to ask this question.
Yes.
Because we know that people are human beings in all professions, but there can be officers or deputies who have invisible matters. They're dealing with stuff.
Yes.
And I don't care what kind of work you do, there might be some people with issues and make bad choices sometimes. I mean, now the public tends to have a more negative view of what you were just talking about. What would you all say to the public?
Let me say this. It is true. We are human. We are a representation of the public that we serve. But in law enforcement, you have to learn how to control your emotions. And if you cannot control your emotions, it's upon myself, it's upon Sheriff Carr here to make sure you're removed from the agency. And the way that we keep a check on people is through supervision, but also Maryland requires all law enforcement now to have body cameras. And what I like to do is, some agencies, not all, they utilize the body camera. When something goes wrong, then they go and review it, and then they'll take the appropriate steps. But for me, the body camera is a tool that we will review on a regular basis. All of my deputies will review them prior to anything coming to light. Because if we see something early, we can catch it, and maybe we can get that deputy the help that they need, you know?
And no, I was going to go ahead.
Yeah, I just like to say, because I want it to be a situation where we can help them up front, or it's a training issue. I don't want it to become a criminal issue, because once it gets there, there's nothing we can do for the deputy.
And I'll just add on to that. So the Law Enforcement Reform Act and the bill that we now have, a lot of things have changed. We're now required to have our deputies and our employees, all of us, anybody who is sworn law enforcement, has to go through a clinical diagnosis or take a test. And that is something that we do every 2 years to make sure that we go through things. We may have people who are dealing with PTSD. We may have people who are dealing with their own issues at home, their families, maybe going through a divorce, maybe dealing with their children who may have learning disabilities or anything. We're human. But the expectation is when you come into work, one, if you're not able to perform at your highest performance, you let us know. We also have early warning systems in which we look and see if a deputy is being laid, if the deputy may come in disheveled, if they're having certain issues, maybe in their personal life. We take that individual out of service, and then we provide them with that assistance that they may need outside of the agencies. Many agencies, I know I've been fighting, but I know Prince George's County, we have clinical technicians that are available to those people. I'll give you a prime example of EAP. A lot of times, every agency in here has EAP, but the stigma of if I go to EAP, one, I may be out of service and I can't work secondary employment, or it's going to be a stigma on me. We're changing that. We're changing that. I'd rather you be the best you that you can be in order for you to be able to help others. If you can't help others, then we can't put you in service. And we want you to make sure, because when you're starting to make those mistakes, a mistake here in this career field may be your life.
Right.
It may be you getting sued and losing, not only your livelihood, but losing your freedom. You may be losing all the assets, because we get civilly sued as well. So this is something that you have to take seriously. You have to understand that this is life-changing. You're impacting somebody right then and there.
And in Anne Arundel County, we have a crisis response team for the community, but we also have a crisis intervention team that is in-house in the sheriff's office, and this is the deputy peers for the deputies, so they can go and talk to these individuals in the sheriff's office for support, and they have latitude. The crisis intervention team, they have latitude. If someone is in need of help where they have to be taken to a facility or something like that, they have the ability to do that. They have the ability to talk with individuals in privacy without things necessarily having to go up the chain of command, as long as it's not detrimental to the agency or civilians. So we do have things in place, safeguards.
In the state of Maryland, my opinion, and I have no problem with saying this, I think we need to do more when it comes to long-term care, because the state facility is full, and we're unable to actually get people the long-term care that they need. And that's why you have that staying still of a 72-hour hold, or they're only there for 48 hours. Well, where else are they going to go? Beds are full at the hospital. Beds are full in the state. What do? You stabilize them, and then you send them home. And then, unfortunately, as deputies and as officers, we then have to go back out, whether a few days later or a week later, and address and deal with that. So that's something that we need here in the state, and I'm just going to say that.
You know what, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, because you can drive down any road, and I don't care if you're in Anne Arundel County or Prince George's County, and you can identify people on the street. You can see they're in need. They need help. I was just in Florida about 2 weeks ago, and I'm in the airport with my wife, and I see this young lady, and she's walking around looking in trash cans for food, right? And I said to myself, there's more to this than just her being hungry or her being homeless. And I went over and talked to her. I said, would you like for me to buy you something to eat? Oh, can you get me some coffee? I don't want it now, and I'll just drink it later. oh, I don't want to bother you anymore. And she starts walking away. And I'm like, ma'am, I don't mind, whatever you want. But she walked away. And I said, that is a young lady who is definitely in need of some mental
Right.
help, some
Right.
help. But where do we send them?
It's not enough in this country. And on this subject, when I did work in schools, I would prep the family. There's a need. We really want to support you as a school, but there aren't a lot of facilities.
Yeah.
And then when the child graduates, age-wise, the parents don't have, control
Right.
over their decisions. It's up to the individual.
Yes.
And I just had a long list of students. I said, they're going to end up in somebody's jail or it's on TV. And officers would say, Miss Martin, they haven't done anything. There's nothing we
Right.
could do.
Exactly.
Mental health would say, well, it's up to them. They have to volunteer to get help.
Now, I'm not a clinician, but I do have 2 daughters, and I understand that you have to be the advocate for your child at an early age to say, hey, my child needs help. And they may need help for the rest of their lives. They may need that extra time on tests because they've been diagnosed with, some kind of condition or something like that. And once you get that help, then you'll see their academics, they start rising, they start doing better because now people understand and your child understands.
Absolutely. What would you all say to someone who has a non-apparent condition or disability regarding being pulled over and knowing, that a deputy or officer is approaching them? Because I get anxious if I'm pulled over, for a light that's out or something like that. I don't know why I'm being pulled over. And so if I multiply my anxiety to that person who has difficulty expressing their thoughts, they already have anxiety, what would you say to them? How should they respond?
So this is a tough question only because we can say all day long, you should do A, B, and C. But as you talked about your anxiety, how can we judge somebody's anxiety and how they feel as a law enforcement or as a public safety, professional? What we're saying is relax. Put your hand maybe on the steering wheel. We want you to relax. Let the deputy or officer engage you and let them ask you the questions. If you do feel uncomfortable, and I tell this to many of our citizens, I don't mind before we get up to the car, if you need to have a parent or if you need to have somebody on, especially when we talk about our youth or somebody with that invisible disability who they may feel comfortable with, call that person, have that person on the phone, put them on speaker, and when we come up to the car to say, hey, I have somebody on, speakerphone, we want you to be at ease. Because the more that you are at ease and you can engage with us, the better off that encounter will be. I will tell anybody, your anxiety or, feeling as if you can hold court while on traffic will always be the negative thing. Yeah. You cannot, you shouldn't have pulled me over. What about, and you have to understand that this is not supposed to be a adversarial type situation. It is, hey, the officer or the deputy has seen a violation. The officer is now trying to engage that individual and let them know, hey, in our interactions, there was a violation. Here's either I'm going to give you a warning or I'm going to cite you for that violation. It shouldn't be, hey, we need to fix this right now. And I mean, that's where we start to get that conflict. But relax. Whatever makes you feel comfortable or that you need to do in order to bring you down, that deputy should also try to de-escalate the situation. Because a lot of times we see people very nervous. They're looking around and doing this, and we have to be able to then assess and say, hey, hold on. Is the person just nervous because I'm coming up to the car, they don't like law enforcement? Or is there something to where, hey, it's something that's going to hurt either myself or them, or it's something to where
I know it's a hard place to be in.
Yes.
And being pulled over is not an everyday occurrence for most people. So you will be nervous. And it's okay to let the deputy know. Deputy, I am so nervous right now, so I apologize if I look fidgety. I'm just nervous. And then that'll let that deputy know, okay, they're nervous. If it's at nighttime, turn your dome light on. That'll let the deputy know, okay, this person is working with me before they even get to the car. If you have tinted windows, put all of your tinted windows down. I don't care if it's in the wintertime or whatever. Put all of your tinted windows down. Once that deputy comes up to the car, he sees who or she's dealing with. Then you can say, Deputy, it is freezing. Can I put my windows back up? And they'll probably say, yes, go ahead, put your windows up, But as long as you're working with the deputy, and just admit, I'm nervous. This is not an everyday occurrence for me.
We're human.
Right, exactly. And I would encourage our viewers who do have disabilities to almost rehearse or have a plan of action in terms of what you should do if you are pulled over, because it's hard in the moment to think about, oh, I should do this or do that. Think about it ahead of time, which brings me to another topic.
I was getting ready to get into it. I'm glad you started, because I was going to say about Eric's Law, but okay.
So there you go. So hopefully our viewers are familiar with and have heard about Eric's ID law. Eric Carpenter Grantham is a young man I've known since he was 5 years old.
Oh, yeah.
I've been his advocate that long. But Eric is a phenomenal young man with autism and other conditions, and he is fighting for a law in the state of Maryland where on a person's license, and it's voluntary, you don't have to do it, but if you would like to have a logo on your license stating that you have autism or mental health condition, something that is not easily apparent, that it be on your license. And his bill went forward in January. It was not passed. However, and that's the second time someone in this state has tried to get a bill like this. I see your face like,
Yeah,
well,
I'm frowning. I'm frowning.
Yeah.
I know. I've never talked to a first responder who wasn't for it.
Right.
Yeah.
But just want everybody to know it's coming back around. His platform is growing. This bill is in other states in the United States, and so we just want to say, Maryland, come on, get on board.
I will say this. I am for it, and the delegates, Wilkins and Taylor, I think, I will testify for that bill, because it makes no sense that I can go get a vanity tag, but I can't get something that will possibly save a life, So I'm all for it.
Man, and I am definitely all for it. And I testified when it came up, and we it was another delegate as well who was out of District 27, had the same situation with her son, and she was out campaigning. And, I think this is so important if we get this passed. And we have other jurisdictions right next to the state of Maryland that this is already there.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the naysayers, and I'm just going to say naysayers, the ones who are fighting this bill, the concern is that once an individual turns 18, then their medical records or information, it'll be hard for them to actually get this off of their license, which I don't know why. Again, it's voluntary. This is something that, from public safety, we want. The more information that we can gather when I ask you for license and registration, and I can see this, the better off we are, where it puts an individual at ease to say that, hey, I don't have to really try to second guess, or I could actually see, based off of this, here's what we're dealing with, and I can put this individual at ease. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And we've seen situations throughout the country in which a person who is struggling or has invisible disability does not get the treatment or care from a public safety or law enforcement like they should have.
Right.
And again, you may not be able to see, and you're taking somebody's body language. Not to count the recent situation that just occurred in which the deputy was locked up. And again, I'm staying away just from the names, but we know that we deserve better, and that our citizens deserve better when it comes to our responding there and making sure that they're safe.
And if veterans can have that on their license, or like you said, you can have other things put on your tags.
Yes.
why does someone else have the right to tell me that I can't have that
Right.
identification?
So
Even I'm an organ donor. They'll put
Yes.
that on your
Right.
license.
Yes.
And they ask me every time I go back to get my
Yes.
license renewed, do you still want to be an organ donor?
Yes.
So they can take it off.
So but the interesting piece in fighting with the state, and like I said, I am all for it. That's how I know some of this stuff. The NBA actually has, I think it's supposed to be a pink or blue card
It's a
that
blue
you are
card.
supposed, that you're supposed to actually display. And when I went up to NBA with Eric and Miss Linda, wonderful mother who is inspirational in
Yes.
doing things. Both of them are inspirational, and I'll fight for them tooth and nail. But they said to me, and I'm in full uniform and I'm there, hey, aren't you aware of this additional card that you have? Well, if I have invisible disability, and I can tell you now, just with my regular license, I sometimes I may
You
not
gotta
know where it
find
is.
it. Right.
Now I have to find an additional card, which is a
Yes.
paper card that, hey, if I get
Or
caught
which
in the
one
rain
do I
or doing
need to
something,
pull?
yeah,
Right.
what am I
Officer,
doing?
you want my license, but I also
Right.
got this card.
And then now you're
and a
pulling
lot
it
of
twice.
officers don't know anything
No,
about
no.
that
You look
card.
you look surprised
You
too when I
do.
say
I
that.
am
Like,
surprised.
and that's what I said
I've
too.
never
And
heard
I
of
said,
this.
well, who are you trading this to? I said, because the deputies that I have, we're unaware of it. As far as that, and they say, well, they can get it from NVA, and yeah,
Okay,
we're
but
trying to roll it
nobody
out.
knows about it.
But my other issue is, why would I want you to, as a person who's already nervous about a traffic stop, to pull two different pieces of documentation out outside of your registration?
Right.
So now I want your license, but then also if you have this additional card, I need you to find that, and I need you to find your registration. That's adding more to a situation that
Yes.
already
Right.
could turn volatile.
Yes. So we are very, very hopeful. As I said, it's going to come back around, and I think it'll pass this time.
Please let
Yes.
me know when it comes, because I'll go
I
with you. I
know
want to testify.
everybody will be there for sure this time.
And I do want to say, with this bill, we were able to secure the state FOP approved this bill. And I know I wrote a letter. I talked to the state. The state did a wonderful. They wrote a letter and an approval of it. From us, as public safety and law enforcement, there's no reason that we would not want to have this to be there, because it helps us in affecting our job or doing our job the
Right.
best that we can.
I think the key is that it's optional.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, I don't have a child with a disability, but if I did, I would like to have the option
Yes.
of making that happen.
Right.
And that's where I feel like people are imposing on other people's rights when they say, no, you can't do that. So let's talk about cultural differences, and especially when we talk about Eric's ID law. What are some thoughts that you have just in terms of the differences in communities and how a law like that could really be meaningful?
As your question, you were asking about the cultural differences. When we look at ERIC ID law, you want to talk about who feels comfortable with hanging around or being around public safety or law enforcement. In an African American community, we're already trying to break those barriers down and make sure that we're able to get into community and that they feel at ease. So then when you talk about an individual who is suffering from or has an invisible disability, this is something that they can then be at ease to know that, hey, when law enforcement comes here, you don't have to be on edge. We have to make sure the African American community understands that this can help that relationship with African Americans when they deal with the law enforcement or public safety, because we now have something identifying that, hey, there's some additional needs that we need to do. Hey, if you don't like to be touched, and I say, hey, sir, can I talk to you for a second? And you pull away from me. It's not the fact that you just want to be combative and you want to fight. It is something to where you don't like to be touched. You don't like bright lights. You may not like, loud noises. So when you put your hands up to your ears, or there's other things, as you mentioned, your badge, and you touch me, it's not a second-degree assault. So I want to make sure that in our communities, African Americans and our communities feel safe with us. And you're talking about 2 African American sheriffs here in the state of Maryland. It's only 4 of us. Yeah. It's only 4 of us out of the whole state of Maryland.
Really?
It's only 4 African American sheriffs. So it tells you that there's still some dynamic and balls that we need to actually push down in order to make sure our community feels safe.
Right. Now, you say that I am actually the first sheriff Sheriff's Office in Anne Arundel County, created in 1650, as I said earlier, but I am the first sheriff of color for Anne Arundel County. So we still got a ways to go in learning the different communities and things like that. But one of the things that we need to really start taking a look at is we've been working with the Black community, we work with the Hispanic community, the Asian community, but now there's that other community, that community with individuals with the hidden disabilities.
Yes.
We need to start talking about them and need to be more proactive, you know, and we need to start doing a better job of working with them directly, you know, because they're out there, they're driving, they're doing different things. But I'll be honest with you, I've yet to see any group besides you come to me and say, hey, what about this community? You know, and I have to be more proactive myself to get out there.
The more opportunities, you know, I don't know, picnics, outdoor events, baseball, the more they interact with you all, the better the understanding becomes. You learn more about them and they learn more about law enforcement.
Right.
It's that simple. It's the relationship. Just like everything else in life, it's about the relationship.
Yeah.
So, look, were you going to say something
No,
else?
I was going to say, I just know, speaking with Eric and hearing how he is around his friends and the reason why he came up with this law, he told his mom, you know, Mom, if I'm around law enforcement and they ask me to do something, I'm able to do it. And I'm able to actually verbalize and tell, hey, I have a invisible disability. But what happens to my friends? I know some of my friends will just take off and run, or they may not listen to the officer. I'm more concerned about what's going to happen to them. And when I heard him tell me that he was concerned that the officer would probably shoot them, I you know, had to step back, and it brought chills down, you know, my back. Not only just for Eric, but just his friends or anybody with invisible disabilities. But in African American communities, we talk about having that talk with our children and our kids.
Right.
I have a 16-year-old son. I have 3 daughters. The oldest is 26. So I understand having that conversation about law enforcement. What happens? What do you do if you're pulled over? How do you feel? It's a little bit different feel for them, only because they see me every day in uniform.
Right.
So they're a little bit more comfortable.
Right.
My friends and family and people who they may know may already be in law enforcement. But what happens to that individual who doesn't really engage in law enforcement, is not around law enforcement? We have to do a better job. And I think we actually, being in these roles and seats, we've done a lot of community work, but to really home in on those invisible disabilities or our African American culture to get them to feel more comfortable with public safety and law enforcement.
And I think one of the things too on the law enforcement side, you know, we get that call for the suspicious person, you know, on the street corner, whatever, or whatever the call may be. We have to start understanding that a crime has not been committed until we determine it has been committed.
Exactly.
So if you approach somebody and they take off running, it does not mean a crime's been committed, you know? So that's what we need to understand on our end too.
Yes. Lots of conversations about that. And you mentioned teenagers or adolescents, and you know, having worked in many schools and worked with many students, having resource officers in buildings and even police officers, and you know, some of the schools that I worked at, sometimes I would just think, why are they here? Well, this is school. This is a school.
Yeah.
I know the world is changing.
Yes.
And schools are very different. And safety is important. But when it comes to students who do have mental health, autism, and some disabilities that, you know, the officer may not be aware of, they just think they're another student and they see them acting differently and need to have a conversation with them. It's hard in that environment to protect the child who can't advocate for themselves under those circumstances. And there needs to be more conversations with school systems, mental health, and first responders in terms of how do we work together.
And I'll just jump in on that. because I used to be a school resource deputy, but I am all for public safety or law enforcement inside the school. It is how they are used that is the issue currently right now. When we look at law enforcement in school, it's really supposed to be to help as a resource. And that's why they say resource deputy or resource officers. We don't enforce school rules and regulations. You know, if the child doesn't want to sit down and they walk out of class, you don't call the officer, you don't call the deputy. That's not our role and responsibility. We understand our roles. We are a guest in that school. And really their response should be while you're in the school is, one, you get to see those kids or those individuals who may not see or view law enforcement in a positive way. Now you can view that person in a positive way and build those relationships up. We at the Prince George's County Office of the Sheriff, I have a middle school program. I would love to go to the elementary school kids. The more interaction that we can have with our youth and help build them up and mentor them and have them have an understanding, the better off when they become an adult, they feel more comfortable. Because you remember in D.C., you said you were in D.C., Boys and Girls Club used to have the officers in the Boys and Girls Club. I remember they used to give you McGruff cards and they used to give the football cards. You would have that. The more that you can engage and deal with that officer in a more positive light and they can help mentor you, the better off you are. And I truly believe in that program and that system. I think we really need to be focusing and dealing with the parents in the home, because you may see it in school, but then we mentor, we help develop, and when they go home, you never know what that family structure may be. And I think that's something that from a public safety standpoint, especially from the Office of the Sheriffs, we deal with families. We deal with as a whole, because the stuff we deal with has everything to deal with families.
We're dealing with evictions, you know,
Domestic
the
violence,
arrest warrants,
child
and things
support.
like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All dealing with families, the EPSs, the mental health piece. So the stuff that we're talking about, it's dealing with families. Something has occurred in that family household that now they've gone to the courts, and now we have to now interject.
Here's something that I tell people all the time. When you're dealing with like law enforcement, you have police. They have what you call officer discretion. Okay, I understand where you're coming from. Look, just don't do it again. Have a nice day.
Okay.
In reality, the sheriff's office, we don't have officer discretion because we have a paper from the courts that must be served. You will be evicted. You will be arrested. You will be taken in for, you know, psychiatric evaluation. So it is very important for us as sheriffs, deputies, and things to get to know the families, to get to know people who have special needs and stuff. So I am like Sheriff Carr here. I encourage that. The more interaction we have with people with special needs, it just makes it, to me, a smoother operation. They understand us. There's no need to be afraid.
Right.
You know, we're here to help.
And that's what this podcast is about, learning more about other people. It helps you grow individually.
Yes.
You probably, in some of your trainings about, you know, different conditions, anxiety, depression, attention deficit, we all have something that, you know, we deal with, we cope with. It doesn't necessarily greatly interfere with your ability to function, but we all have something.
Exactly.
And I think the more you learn about other people, the better off we will all be.
Right.
And that's all this is really about. This has been an awesome conversation. I invite you all to come back because we could do a part 2 and just keep right on rolling. I want to thank everybody for listening in. I hope this has been a meaningful and a productive conversation, that our viewers really have learned something about what it's like to live the life of a first responder. And now you can see the human side and how much they do care and what type of training they provide to their officers so that we all can be in the same space and get along much better. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you soon.